Success. It's what we all aim for. It's what we aspire to achieve. As a society, we place successful people on pedestals in every area of life. In sports, in academia, in business, the corporate ladder. And there is one group of people that dominate the pedestals, achieving success again and again and again. They are the high achievers. High achievers taste success more than most. They win the awards, receive the top marks, are praised and are celebrated. But is there a dark side to high achievement that we ignore? Hi, I'm Jaden and I'm a high achiever. I'm smart, I'm organised, I find school easy and high grades come naturally to me. Well, that's how the world sees me. Under the mask, I feel like my work is not good enough, I don't have it all figured out, I'm a procrastinator and often I feel like I'm barely staying afloat. In the midst of apparent achievement, I started to discover that lurking behind the face of success is a standard that can sap the life out of high achievers. The standard is perfectionism. The Oxford Dictionary defines perfectionism as the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. For me, perfection had shifted from an ideal goal to a standard I had to achieve, and that didn't feel healthy. And I've been wondering, am I alone or are there others like me, stuck in the trap of putting the weight of our identity on the hollow shell of perfectionism? I've been chatting with some other students about perfectionism and I wanted to hear their thoughts.
At the core of the word high achiever, it's the first thing that comes to my mind is 100 out of 100, excellences, teachers that are really happy with you.
Yeah, I definitely would define myself to be a high achiever. I think that I just really put a lot of effort into things that I really want to do well in.
As a society, what we know as perfection is something that's flawless, it's faultless, but I now know that it's pretty unattainable and that it doesn't really exist.
Part of being a high achiever, I feel responsible towards achieving success and achieving well in whatever I'm doing.
Well, growing up, I was like a pretty average kid. I was very, very, very bad at math, and that was just a big toll on me. And then I started doing Model UN, and I figured out that I was really interested in politics, debate, and the social sciences.
I have 5 older sisters, and so when I was little, I'd always look up to them and see them doing these amazing things. And so when I started to get older, I wanted to also do amazing things and I guess set that perfection standard for myself.
But then when I moved to New Zealand from India, the Indian curriculum is known to be very rigorous with competition, but in New Zealand there's not that much competition. But then when I started competing with myself, I was constantly critiquing myself for things that didn't need critique.
When I first started realizing I was becoming a high achiever would have been in year 10. I was also the monocutor, so a school leader, and I feel like I had all this pressure, I had all this responsibility. And during this time, I was constantly working, constantly building a business, doing schoolwork.
When I was younger, my family took a lot of pride in kids that went to really good universities. And so the only reason I do want to go is because that is all I've seen being praised growing up. I always joke about starting my own flower shop, but that diminishes 13 years of work.
I have this very distinct memory of that when I was in primary school. I didn't want to try a new spelling word or do a new maths equation if I knew I was going to get it wrong. I always wanted to have it right on the first go.
You feel the need to be good at everything, but at the core of human nature, that's not who we are. We can't be good at everything.
And this kind of comes down to being a high achiever. I really enjoy working hard, but I do still find it really hard to accept not achieving the best.
And when I kept getting good grades and the endorphins that gave me, it's it doesn't matter how much I have to work if it means that if I can see that grade.
It's really hard to kind of get out of that perfectionistic cycle. Once I kept getting excellence after excellence, it was almost like I needed to keep doing that.
Then it got to a point where it was like, when I'm getting these good grades, they don't mean anything anymore, because now the endorphin rush has like run out. Now it's like that was the expectation. There's nothing different going on here.
Anything else kind of felt like I wasn't living up to the best that I could be.
I think it also takes away a lot of the self-respect that you have for yourself.
So I'm not alone. Academic excellence is often seen as the cornerstone of success, but it starts to become unhealthy when we let it become the measure of our self-worth. The experiences of these high achievers sound real familiar, so to explore this further, I'm going to see psychologist Amanda Pinney to find out more about perfectionism through a psychological lens.
Psychologists are notoriously high achievers as well. So personally relate to the topic on a number of levels. I thought it was really interesting, talking about the addictive cycle. If you think about addictive behaviour, like being compelled to do something, right? It's like you are fulfilling some other kind of need with it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things, I guess, to ask yourself, or we can all ask ourselves when we've got that pattern, is what need is it meeting for me? Why am I so drawn to it? Why does the praise mean so much?
Yeah.
And what other kinds of validation am I getting in my life?
For people who find, I guess, that validation through academics and even from quite a young age, how does that play into that?
So if you look at something like schema therapy, you'll see a really beautiful description of core needs of children. And so we've all got those needs for safety and acceptance and all of those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
So we're constantly seeking those things. Praise is powerful, right?
Yeah.
Really powerful. And not saying this is the cycle that's been set up for anyone in particular, but parents can get really busy, or they might be doing something else, but they notice that you've done this thing and they know it's important in life. So lots of praise is given for it. But the child might have heaps of other stuff going on, developmentally, or even within a family unit. And so it starts getting more and more extra weight put to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it does feel good, and that's why we do these things, right? Even drug using behaviour. People do that generally because either it feels good or because they're avoiding something else, right? So everything we do has got some kind of purpose to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. What is the purpose behind striving for academic success? Amanda raised the idea that addictive behaviour begins because validation feels good. But she also said it could be because we're avoiding something. I wonder if when the rush of endorphins from good grades wears off, if our purpose can come down to being driven by running from failure. If the addictive cycle to achievement begins at such a young age though, does it really just stop when we leave high school? Or does it extend further into every bit of our lives? I want to ask some high-achieving young professionals about their journey and what they think.
I've dealt personally with perfectionism. I'm a high achiever and I like to push myself to the best of my abilities. When I was younger, I found myself in a place where I put my worth and my self-image into my performance.
Mum and Dad always said, as a bowler, you do your best. Now, it has nothing to do with the grades, right? It was about the effort that I put in.
I never really was a one-thing kid. I was never the sporty kid, the super smart kid. But I was always in plays. I was always in sports teams. I was pretty academic. And then I went to high school, and the pool of people, all of a sudden I was starting to become top of things.
And then in year 9, somehow managed to top all of my classes. And so that moment of doing better than everybody else was the catalyst for me going, oh, I am good at things. I've now set a bar for myself, even though I worked myself so hard in that first year of high school. And now I must maintain that bar. And so I did.
I was the first year at the university to be in one of the business comp teams, and that was the year we won the national comp. And it was pretty cool for the first time. Then in my last year, we won the comp for the second time.
Any time that I wasn't the best at something or the top of the class or got an excellence in something, that was me going, well, if I'm not the best at something, then who am I? And I didn't like that feeling.
Competing against kids that they were full-time science kids, and I was taking bio for the first time level 3, and somehow still thought it was a good goal to say, I'll get top of this class. I was a student rep for the Board of Trustees, head girl my final year, captaining my teams.
So my journey from high school into uni was pretty much in the same vein. I found myself still trying to achieve at the highest level. I managed to, again, top some of the classes. I did honours after my bachelor's degree, and I got into the top lab at Waikato University.
It all crescendoed in my last year of uni. It was probably the hardest I'd ever worked in my life, and that was because I did a 4-year degree in 3 years, which was something I didn't think I was going to do at the start.
I got my level 3 exam results for my university. Still was very passionate about teaching, but I think I was just scared, and I got not great results. I went to university, I tried really hard, and I think I just was so scared of failing, and then did really well.
And so what I did was, during my full-time internship at KPMG, I also did a 30-point paper. So I added an extra honours paper in summer school, which usually would be full-time, in doing that. But my journey from there, yeah, I finally got in that year, those grades were the best I ever got. And the semester after was even better. And I couldn't believe it. After a while though, once you get there, that positive feedback loop can become a bit of a vicious cycle.
I remember I got this email and I was asking all my friends who I also knew got pretty good grades, being like, did you guys get this email too? And they're like, no, Bailey. And I had gotten the highest GPA in the university in my first year. And I just couldn't get it. All these numbers that were like building up to this point and were like the measurement of my value and my self-worth and my identity, all of a sudden you get caught up in numbers again. You could spend yourself calculating GPAs and it didn't mean anything.
I'd had this inkling in the back of my mind, but it really started to reinforce it to me in my 3rd year and 4th year, that maybe there was more to my identity than just what I did and who I was to people.
I was actually all set to go to KPMG, and with that, BNZ, the Bank of New Zealand, yeah, they heard about some of my achievements and then they pitched me on something, and what I realised was where they were going was a little bit more of what I wanted to do. And then this role came up in our mobile mortgage manager team, which I just love it. I didn't realise it at the time, but this is a role people take usually 6 years of training to get to. Actually being only a year and a half into work and now having that responsibility, it's pretty darn cool.
I got offered 2 teaching positions very early on. The real world, even though it's still in education being a teacher, there is far less systems that I could easily grasp my head around to, I guess, find my value and my worth, or to feel like I was doing well.
One of my professors made a comment, and I remember it to this day. She was talking about all the honours students. She said to me, Monique, by this point, the only people who are left are the anxious overachievers. And it was true. I looked at my honours class and I thought, oh, I don't know if I really want to be this. I don't know if I really want to fit this stereotype my entire life. I didn't get into a program that I really wanted to, into clinical psychology, even though I was one of the top students, and it took everyone by surprise, including my supervisor. And I thought, that's so strange. But then who am I, aside from this dream, this high performance dream that I've had for my entire life?
Essentially what you're doing is your worthiness is placed in something else, not in like you, right?
Yeah.
As a person, flaws, imperfections, strengths, all of that stuff, right? But in this like outside thing that you've got to kind of like keep moving towards, and other people have got to decide how much value they give to it, right? And then how much reward they give to you.
Even as a grad, I had massive things of where I had put expectations on myself and was freaking out because I was stressed about trying to get the next goal, right? Isn't life always going to the next goal? And when you hit it and your only goal was to do it perfect, there's an emptiness that rests after every achievement. And so for me, as a high achiever, learning how to not be caught up in emptiness by having purpose in what I do, but also realizing if I do miss it, I'm still enough.
I'm a human being and I had to accept that I also had flaws. It's okay to be imperfect because it's okay to be human.
So imperfection isn't something to fear when we learn to separate our success from our worth as a person. I'm realizing that perfectionism cannot coexist with authenticity. The constant pursuit of perfectionism can result in a lack of authenticity as we strive to present an idealized version of ourselves to the world. I've got this external image that I'm layering up layer after layer, but that mask is hiding away all of the imperfections and the flaws that I have on the inside. So what are some of the first steps to overcome the addictive cycle to grades?
One of the things, just a sensible thing to do, would be to look really broadly at your life. What are some other areas that I can get like some of these really good feelings from? Think about that isolation. It's almost like, you know, you've got to have all of these things to be okay, and it's a little bit of a mask or a facade, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I think that would be part of the healing process, is like being okay with reaching out and talking to the important people in your life.
Yeah.
I've had these like, you know, perfectionist sort of like tendencies, right, and really high standards for my work and my study and all those kind of things. And that was definitely ingrained in me from like really young, like be the best, work hard, all that kind of like that messaging, right? And my manager said to me, Amanda, sometimes good enough is good enough. But she was right? Like there's a difference between excellence and integrity in your work and then, you know, working yourself into burnout, right? Which is the other end of the spectrum of it, isn't it?
It's this idea of wearing a mask where it's outwardly I'm all these things, but inwardly I feel like I'm falling apart. From a psychological perspective, how are those masks built up, but also how are they broken down?
Yeah. When you talk about the mask, what you're talking about really is like, I've got this internal, conscious, emotional experience of life that I know really deeply, and I feel like I can't share that with anybody, right? So when you talk about how do you overcome that, I actually think you've already started by connecting with these other high achievers and showing them that they're not alone, and you know that you're not alone now, right? So that's about universality of experience, isn't it? Like we have common experiences as humans, and it's not until we start talking to each other that we start to learn what those are.
So how does someone who's been in the, I guess, mindset of I'm working for an outcome, I'm doing this, and just stuck, how do you begin to rewire and refocus?
I mean, it would be interesting to kind of start noticing some of your thought processes around it, and then just even asking yourself, well, what do I think is going to happen, you know, if I get the grade versus I don't get the grade? And you might notice a little bit of a story or a narrative going on, like, I am my grades. If I fail, it means that, you know, I'm going to be rejected, or I'm going to fail at life, right? I'm not going to get into university, or, you know. Because as you get older, so many things can be worked on later, like, and just life just isn't perfect, right? So much happens outside of our control. One of my questions would be, what would happen if you did fail?
That's such a challenging question. I've run from failure for so long and built up masks and walls to prevent it. So making mistakes always feels like they're fatal. For so long, I've felt like failure lets down the people around me, tarnishing both my academic record and stopping me from carrying on. However, over this journey of confronting my own perfectionism, I'm beginning to realize that falling short of a perfect standard isn't failure. It's human. Making mistakes in the short term has no detrimental impact to my long-term trajectory, but perfectionism places a filter on the learning pit and classes struggling as a failure. But that's just part of the journey of growth. So how can we achieve highly without the fear of failure? And what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with success?
High achievement at the end of the day stems from a really good place. Quite often, high achievers are the ones who, as kids, were consumed with learning and loved to know more things about the world. As we grow older, we can sometimes twist it and turn it into the basis for our identity, or the measure of our self-worth. And those things aren't good, and those things aren't healthy.
I like the phrase appetite for growth as a high achiever especially, because it's not just about you achieving a goal. It's about responding to failure, how you go and do that. Perfectionism though, in my mind, I'm just hearing, okay, I have to nail absolutely everything and not make any mistakes. And when you have that mindset, you're naturally just going to beat yourself up. How can you not?
Even just having some self-compassion, acknowledging that, hey, I'm actually really scared of what people would think of me if I didn't do all these things. Because you know what, that's a lot of pressure to carry. Yeah. And I think, wherever you can, extending kindness to yourself.
An appetite for growth, on the other hand, is completely different. It's going, how are you responding to negative feedback? When someone actually gives you something, when you've missed the mark or they've critiqued your work, are you responding in a way that's wanting growth?
A fixed mindset is outcome focused. You attain perfection or this particular outcome in order to be okay, right? Yeah. And if you don't, it's a failure. You've failed, you're a failure, right? And that kind of mindset actually stops you from learning so much. And the growth mindset is more about process and opportunities for learning.
You're a learner at the end of the day. That's what's important. So cultivate that. Don't cultivate the outcome. Cultivate the journey, the process. Coming back to that childlike sense of wonder is a really healthy return back to that place of authenticity and that place of a healthy level of high achievement. High achievement in itself is not intrinsically bad. It's where we put our identity and our weight on it that turns it into something that's healthy or unhealthy.
Appetite for growth and perfectionism is actually going to the same goal, but just one of them's way more mentally healthy. And one of them allows you to fail, which we all do. And so because of that, it was actually just the shifting of mindset of going, okay, instead of make sure you do everything you can not to fail, when you fail, how are you going to respond?
As you were talking, I was thinking, well, how about learning for learning's sake, right? Learning to explore and learning with genuine curiosity, which is what children do.
Often you'll hear kids just asking the question, why? Why? There's that constant desire and curiosity with the world, the wonder and a willingness to learn more about the world. That is such a beautiful spirit to have within you. As you get older, sometimes the world grows grayer and duller. We return into this idea of who I am is measured by what I do. But as a kid, you don't think about those things at all. And there's such a beauty in this wonder.
Appetite for growth has to be and centers around feedback of going, your main growth, comes from feedback. It's the games you lose, if you're thinking about sports, that you learn the most usually. We stop often becoming teachable, becoming curious. But for an appetite of growth thing, the problem with not being teachable and not being curious is that you're way less open to feedback. And that's why perfectionism is real interesting as well compared to an appetite of growth per se, because perfectionism, there's a limit. There's an area which you're like, oh yes, I've got it and I've nailed it here. When appetite for growth understands you're never arrived. You never will arrive. You still have to keep on learning.
For me personally, I found that I'd placed too much weight on the outcome of my work and what I did. And then I was reminded in my personal faith journey, there's this beautiful verse in the Bible when Jesus said to his disciples, let the little children come to me, because their faith is what I'm wanting out of you adults. Their ability to look at the world, to look at creation and learning and with this sense of childlike wonder, that's what's important. And there's so much excitement in the world when you look beyond your grades. There's so much wonder in it and beauty in it when you look beyond people's expectations of you and your expectations of yourself.
On this journey, I'm finding out that a healthy relationship with high achievement is possible, and it's a beautiful space to be in. Living with curiosity for the world and understanding that not everything will go right straight away is such a freeing mindset to have. As high achievers, we so often lose the natural celebration, but being proud of how far we've come, even if we haven't met our next goal, is such a healthy thing to be doing. When high achievement becomes focused entirely on the outcome and no longer on the learning, it becomes toxic. When you work so hard just to receive an excellence for your pie chart or an A+ or another award without focusing on the learning and the growth available, toxic pressures can begin to arise. And I've been that student for most of my schooling life, focusing on the grade just so that I can keep my marks intact, instead of focusing and learning for learning's sake. Our achievements should never define us. We shouldn't lean on perfectionism for our validation and acceptance. Sitting here at the end of my explorative journey, I've learned the power of taking down our masks and separating my identity from my achievements. I've learned that it's okay to not have it all sorted out and that others can see that. And ironically, I've wrestled with perfectionism the entire time I've crafted this documentary, wanting the perfect angles, the perfect shots, the perfect editing, the perfect audio, and every other imaginable thing. But at the end of the day, there comes a point where you have to accept the work you've done and you get to be proud of that. That's the point that I'm at now. And that is what it means to take down your mask. This is part of my journey, and I think it's time for you to start yours.